Thank you for joining us once again on our ongoing conversation with one another between myself and Pastor Paul Thompson of Huntersville United Methodist Church. I'm Steve.Autrey, the pastor at Denver United Methodist Church. And if you've watched us before, you know what this is about. If you haven't, this is an effort to extend the conversation about what we talk about on Sunday morning beyond Sunday morning. And we are looking forward to what is coming this Sunday, as Paul and I are both on the same schedule with preaching out of the Gospel of Luke this coming week. So thank you for being a part of this. And as always, if you would like, share, all those kind of things, it helps our ministries out a lot and gives us more opportunities to post more things. So thank you. Now, Paul, as we turn to the Gospel of Luke, what would you like folks to know as they begin reading Luke? And how is Luke situated among the Gospels?
Yeah, so we are pretty clear that Mark's Gospel was the first Gospel written, and that both the writers of the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew had Mark as a source. And one of the things that we begin to recognize about Luke is that Luke was probably considered a physician. Luke was a part, at least, of a circle of the community that included the disciples. And this gospel flows certainly from Luke and the companions of Luke, their experience of Jesus. It is a 2-volume set, which is important to note. A 2-volume set, meaning that in the Gospel of Luke, first chapter, it is written to Theophilus, Theophilus, which translated in Greek is a lover of God. Then you turn to the book of Acts, and it says clearly, this is a 2nd volume, O Theophilus. So pretty clear that Luke and Acts are written by the same author. They are a 2-volume set, and that's really important to note.
And it's also interesting that Luke is unique among all biblical writers in that he's not Jewish.
So Luke is definitely writing from an outsider's perspective, and that is one of the key features of the Gospel of Luke. One of the things that you'll note,
meaning he was Gentile.
Meaning he was Gentile, and that he wrote from an outsider Gentile
Right.
perspective. He certainly understood the Jewish context, but he was not Jewish, and I think therefore begins to grapple with this real question: is what does it mean to be an outsider, a Gentile? Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. What does that mean for the world?
Now, one of the things I've been encouraging folks here at Denver to do is not to try to harmonize these gospels. Don't make them say the same thing. Allow them to have their own distinct voices. And I picked that up from the Bema podcast. That's not mine, original to me, nor is the thought that you shouldn't harmonize the gospels. And that's something that I have to say I experienced in my childhood and my growing up in the church. We didn't deal much with how Matthew, Mark, Luke, and especially John are different from each other. Now, for someone who says, well, how can they be different if they're telling the same story, and does that invalidate them? How would you answer that question about the differences that are in the Gospels?
Well, it's really critical that we recognize that even the two of us, if Steve and I witnessed, let's say, a car accident, we're both standing there watching as it happens, we would both perceive it from a very different perspective. Steve through his eyes, mine through mine. We would begin to tell the story, and we would tell it different. Steve might emphasize a different aspect of the story. I might emphasize a different aspect of the story. So these are the gospel writers. They are witnessing and telling the same story, the story of Jesus, but they're telling it from their perspective.
Mm.
And they certainly do also, in ways, tailor the story so that it is as it is intended for a particular audience so that that audience can appreciate and understand the message that they're trying to convey. So I think that's a significant part of
Yeah.
why we read the Bible in the way that we do.
And for example, in chapter 6 of Luke, where we get Jesus teaching what is the equivalent to the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, Luke writes it that way. He came down with them and stood on a level place. So that's an interesting thing. Matthew has Jesus delivering these words on a mount, Sermon on the Mount, in a way that's reminiscent of Moses. What does it mean that Luke has Jesus come down and teach on a level place?
Well, I think it is both, it's not quite geographical, but it's a statement that it's a level playing, meaning available for other people, available for a non-Jewish audience.
Yeah.
It is a statement that it wasn't high up on the mountain as like the Torah, the Ten Commandments were given to Moses. This is on a level playing, Jesus speaking to people.
Yeah, I like that too. It's an accessible word. It's not, Jesus is the great leveler, whether you know everything or whether you know nothing, whether you have all the gifts of the world or whether you feel like you have no gifts.
So when
Jesus
we
is
begin
that.
to study the scriptures, one of the things that we do is again recognizing that probably Matthew and Luke had Mark as a source. You begin to look at material that they include that's different. And you just compare, contrast, and you see if you can detect anything in those differences that might have been important. Like, for example, you point out that Luke says he's doing this on a level plane. And then he repeats very much what we would find in Matthew, and we call them the Beatitudes. Luke has woes and blessings.
Mhm.
And in the Gospel of Matthew, one of the Beatitudes says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit."
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of a spiritualizing this idea of poor in spirit. Luke takes it a different way, and Luke says, "Blessed are those who are poor."
Yeah.
I mean, literally says, if you don't have money, you're okay. God's got you. So we begin to compare, contrast those messages, and we try to figure out what angle, what is it that God is saying to us through this Gospel of Luke. And one of the things that I really am struck by as you continue to study the Gospel of Luke is the inclusive nature of this book. And I know that's a dirty word. Oh gosh, that word just sets some folks off and triggers us. But but in terms of the gospel of Jesus Christ, it is the good news. It is the
Well,
absolute
and-
understanding that this message goes beyond a Jewish audience to the world, and that includes me and you as Gentiles.
right. And so we are the outsiders in this equation. So we should long to be included in what Jesus is doing. And that is something not to be upset about, but something to celebrate. So as we look at the work that Luke does, and you mentioned some of the stories that are specific to the Gospel of Luke, they're the ones we're going to be looking at come this Sunday. So and they're all about lost and found. So tell us a little bit about Paul. Well, you happen to have a biblical name, by the way.
Yeah.
I guess I
Yeah,
do too, since my given name is Stephen. But
Stephen.
what's Luke trying to tell us about what's going on in chapter 15? Because we get a series of parables or stories that bring about the teaching, the parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and what we typically call the parable of the prodigal, which may not be the best name, but
Probably not the
parable
best.
of the lost son may be another way to look at it. But
Parable of the loving father, maybe.
yeah. Yeah, so we definitely get these three parables, boom, 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 back to back. They're all about things that are lost and found.
So Luke sets the context. There is an ongoing debate. I guess that's a polite way of saying there's ongoing, really, animosity between Jesus and the inner circle of religious groups that we typically refer to the Pharisees, Sadducees, and the scribes, meaning the religious leaders that were recognized in the Jewish tradition as being very ardent followers of God, very zealous followers of God, and very knowledgeable leaders, very knowledgeable followers of God. So Jesus is in constant conversation. It is a little acrimonious. They do not trust what he says. They do not believe what he says. They don't recognize the authority by which he says it. And so Luke sets the precedent, sets the preface for this, and says this is in response to their belief that somehow they are better than, they are the privileged people, and so Jesus tells these three parables to combat that mindset that somehow we are the privileged few who are in relationship with God. So you start off in the first one is a parable about a sheep. And you start to look if you've ever been a farmer, we grew up beef cattle farmers. We had cows. If my dad, we drove out into the pasture, my dad could absolutely, in about a minute, he could look around and see what cows were missing. And we probably had 50, 75 head of cattle almost all the time, if not sometimes more. He could look and say, okay, I'm missing one. And then we would begin a
Well, your
search.
dad's name was Moses, so
And
I
my
guess.
dad's name was Moses, so let's be clear about that. So in that setting, as a shepherded sheep out in the wilderness, what that would have meant, okay, we're gonna ignore the needs of the 75 and we're gonna go searching for the 76 one. It really didn't make a
So let me
lot of
just ask you, if you're out there in the field, your dad notices one of the cows is missing. What does he do in that?
he goes to search, and he typically knows where those places where the cows, if the cow is going to have a calf, if the cow might be sick, he knows where some of those places where they might go to lay down. And so he was going to go and going to go find that cow, see what he could do to help that cow. And because again, my dad was very much invested in that in the health of that cow and the benefit of that cow, economically and otherwise.
And so here you have this image of, 99, right? And have 100 sheep, 99 are found, leaves the 99 to go find the one. What's the what's the baseline message of that for us?
So again, it is the importance of the one that is lost, and there is rejoicing in heaven over the finding of that one. There is this deep sense in which uh, God will go to whatever lengths to find the one that is missing, the one that is lost. Doesn't mean he doesn't care about the 99, but he means he cares about even the one that hasn't been found yet.
Mhm.
And I think that's such a message for us. And it even goes on to tell in the parable about the joy of recovering that one and bringing it back, slinging it over his shoulders, walking back with it. And I think we're supposed to draw from that this idea that God is is that kind of God, rejoices over the ones that were lost now being found. It doesn't mean doesn't care about the 99 that are safely in the fold, but it sure does mean that God is very interested in that one that's on the outside.
So then you follow this with in chapter 15, starting with verse 8 and going through 10 with a very short parable about a woman who's lost a coin and how she sweeps the whole house to find it, goes to great lengths to find the coin. And then when she finds it, she calls, she celebrates, right? She rejoiced with me for I found this coin that I've lost. I've often wondered how much do you think that coin was worth?
Yeah, when you don't have a lot, as probably I think we're meant to take from this parable that this woman doesn't have a lot. And when she loses this one coin, it represents a significant part of her portfolio, we'll say. It represents a significant part of her assets. And so it's almost as if she is on this track. This is so critical to my well-being.
Well,
This is
right.
such an important part.
And where are we to see ourselves in this story? Which is one of the things, one exercise to do with parables. Where do I see myself in the story?
Well, that is, man, that's a great point. So oftentimes we almost see ourselves as the Jesus-like figure.
The one doing the sweeping.
Sometimes the woman, maybe we're supposed to see ourselves as that 90, that 100th sheep or that one coin that's lost and supposed to recognize we are at some point in our life, maybe all the time, we are that lost sheep. We are that lost coin.
Well, and that, you know, let's, I mean, this woman, the value of this coin probably, to somebody as wealthy, they wouldn't even look for it, right? But to her, it meant everything, evidently, at least to go to great lengths to find it. And sometimes we think we don't have much value. I mean, I talk with people all the time who think, for instance, I remember when my grandmother was getting up in age, she was 94, and she kept saying, "I don't know why God has left me here because I'm no good to no one." Right?
Yeah.
And getting because she couldn't do the things that she thought brought value. She couldn't cook she couldn't clean, those things that she had done an entire life. And I don't mean to demean cooking and cleaning. My grandmother was an amazing, amazing woman who, but that was part of how she, could she garden, could she do all the things that she did throughout her life to establish a household? And when she couldn't do those things, she perceived that she had lost value. I
Mhm.
think one of the things we need to take from this is you have immense value to God just as you are, not for what you can produce or what you can do, but just because you are. And we devalue our worth too much. There are a few people who overvalue theirs, perhaps, but most of us have a hard time believing God would love us enough to come find us.
Yeah.
And yet here it is, God coming, this image of the woman looking, right? It's also an interesting image of that Luke is brave enough to use a feminine image uh, for God in a parable. So
Hmm. Yeah.
it's an interesting thing. But then we move from that one to which probably, there are a lot of stories Jesus is certainly known for. Um, this one may be the best known of all of Jesus's teaching, which again we often refer to simply as the parable of the prodigal. And we know the story. Man has two sons. The oldest one, who would have been the one who would have inherited the bulk of the estate, is the dutiful, hardworking. The younger son has some wanderlust, and he is sick of being there with his dad and his brother, living out his life in the family. And we have to remember in the ancient world, in Jesus' day, this is how it worked. It's not like when you turned 18, you went off to college and then you went off and made your fortune. Your life was within the family unit forever.
Hmm.
And the, there was not, and so the younger son's like, hey, give me what will be mine and let me go. I'm tired, which is a way of saying to the father,
I
you're,
wish you were dead.
you're as good as dead to me, right?
I don't have time to wait for you to die. I need my stuff now.
Yeah. And then we know, yeah. And the father gives it to him. The son goes off and wastes the money. Um, doesn't take him long to, the old saying, a fool and his money are soon departed. Well, this happens here. And then he gets so low to a point where he realizes even the servants in my father's house are treated better than I am. And if I could just go back and be a servant, at least I wouldn't be starving to death.
Yeah, he gets so hungry. He takes a job feeding pigs, which for a Jewish boy would have been as low as it gets.
Mhm.
And then he recognizes that even the pigs are getting fed and he's starving to death. And I always tell when I tell this story, I think this is if I ever had to describe the word repentance, I think this story is an example of repentance. The Bible says he comes to his mind, he comes to his right mind, or he comes to a deep sense of recognition. I could go home. I don't have to do this anymore. I could come home. Now, I question in my mind sometimes he seems to be still manipulating. I'm going to make a story up. I'm going to go and I'm going to tell, oh, Dad, I don't deserve to be a son. Just make me a servant. I still see some manipulation in that. Maybe that's not true, but I see it because I was the older brother, even though I'm the younger brother. I don't know about you, but I've lived. I love my brother, but at times I think I've been the more of the older brother type. He's been a little more of the prodigal, and
Well,
us
yeah, I
older
don't know.
brothers in that sense, we kind of resent that. But anyway, he comes home. He has a message, rehearsed speech. The father, this dignified elder in the community and the family, hikes up his skirt. I can just see it in my mind. Maybe on his rocking chair on the front porch, and he sees this figure in the distance. He hikes up his skirt and he goes running out and makes really quite the scene.
Yeah.
Uh, Absolutely makes a fool of himself in many people's eyes. He falls all over the boy. Oh, my son, I've lost you. Oh, my son. And everybody else is going, have you forgotten? You forgot what
Mhm.
this boy did? Have you forgotten how bad he treated you? Have you forgotten what happened here? And
Throws a party.
and so the father says, this is my son.
Mhm.
I don't care.
Yeah.
You can hold all that, but this is my boy.
And then, of course, often we end the story there in our telling, but the real heart of the story comes afterwards with the older brother being so mad that he won't even come in to the celebration. And the father has to go out to him too. So he's not only having to go out to the wayward younger son, he's having to go out again to the one who's got his back up because he thinks he's been wronged somehow. And
You
that's
could
it. It's
even
an
take this parable and see that this is the Jewish people. That's one interpretation of this, that Jesus is telling this like to his Jewish audience who might have been hearing this, the Pharisees, the scribes, all of that. That's who you are, and
Mhm.
and I want to invite these other people into the party.
And
And
but it doesn't mean you're disinvited,
it doesn't mean you're disinvited. It
right?
just means I
So
might want other people.
well, and this idea. So what you see in Luke's gospel is this arms wide open, like, hey, whoever is out there, come. You are beloved of God.
So
And
we make such a
and
big
it's
deal out.
also a warning to those of us, let's just put ourselves on the inside. Because we are all, if you're watching this, you're probably on the inside
Yeah.
these days. Um, we have to pay attention to who God's inviting. Now, one of my memories of growing up in church was when we had a young pastor come in, this little Baptist church that my mom had grown up in. So of course that's where we went to church. And I think I was about 9 or 10 years old. I remember this very well. Um, so new pastor after having the same preacher for years, new pastor named Dan, and we were so excited as kids because he was younger. He was just a new thing, and he was from this exotic place called Montana, and we thought that was cool. But one of the things that Dan did when he got into the community was he began just interacting with everybody. And there were a couple of folks, a couple of boys, a little older than me, teenagers, 16, 17 years old, who were pretty rough. They lived in rental trailers. They were food stamp recipients, welfare recipients, whatever you want to call them. When something went missing in the community, they always got blamed for stealing it because, well, they usually did. And Dan started talking to these two boys, and Gary and Jerry, and he started riding bicycles with them. and getting to know them. And then he invited them to church, and they started coming to church. And Dan was talking about baptizing them. And before we knew it, um, the deacons of the church had a meeting with Dan and let him know that this wasn't going to happen in this church. And Dan resigned and left. And because the people of the church didn't want those people. Now you got to remember, this we're all in the mountains of southern Appalachia. I mean, to say to somebody you're too poor to come to our church,
Yeah.
or you're not the right people. Um, and that was more what the message was. You're not of the same social standing, and we don't want you among us. We're sure there's a church for you. It's just not this one.
So
That's
we
so
take even
upsetting.
we take the Christmas story. Luke tells the Christmas story. Really, Matthew doesn't really tell the Christmas story. Mark doesn't have a Christmas story at all. But if you look at the Christmas story through the right eyes, it says exactly what you're saying. Jesus was from Nazareth, and nothing good can come out of Nazareth, is how it says it in John. Jesus was born in a feeding trough, in a manger. It was the people who, the shepherds who
Hmm.
came to
Well, who
his
were, and the
birth
shepherd's
vigil.
testimony wasn't acceptable in court because they weren't the right kind of people.
Right. So from the very beginning, we see this story as Luke tells it, includes the people from the outside. We're talking about DEI in the right way, including people not because it felt like a culturally, nice thing to do, but that it was the good news of Jesus Christ. Jesus came to save sinners, the rich ones, the poor ones, the ones who thought they were better than others, the ones who thought they had no hope at all. Jesus comes to bring good news, and Luke goes to great lengths to make sure that everybody everybody gets included in this message, and it really does then become, I think, especially as Wesleyan Methodist, we always kind of relate a little bit more to this book of Luke because I think in all of us Wesleyan Methodists there's this bent to recognize that if you feel like you're too much on the inside, that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And and then also to answer the challenges of how are we being hospitable? Because every church I've ever visited or served, they'll all say well, we welcome everybody. And and that's not always true. And I think churches can lack hospitality in ways they're not even aware of. And what prevents people from being a part of our congregation? Uh, that can be, there's so many things can do that, from class to the size of the church building to the cars in the parking lot. Now, there's some things we can't do a lot about, but can we be the kind of people who are willing to engage with those who are the poor, who are the lost son, who are the ones who are causing the trouble, so to speak, and to hear their story, be part of their lives, and develop the kind of relationships to help us actually come together in who Jesus is across whatever may divide us.
So let me close this loop as we kind of start to come to an end. This is all the way through from the beginning of Luke's gospel to the very end. And if you turn to the last chapter, the story of the resurrection, very early in the first hour of the week, it was the women.
Mm.
It was Mary, mother of James, Salome. So even in the resurrection, those who love Jesus, they are planning to go anoint his dead body with spices. So even in the resurrection story, you've got women who end up being the bearers of the best news of all time. They are the ones, they're the first evangelists, they're the first proclaimers of the message that is at the heart of all Christian message. He's not dead, he's alive. And so the inclusivity of Luke's gospel by including these women, their names, their duties, their tasks, their message, I think is just another in a long line of ways we can read the Gospel of Luke and then see this is a gospel that's included for everybody's included in this one.
And so when we get to Acts here in a couple of weeks, we'll have the chance to visit with Luke again and see how this plays out in the new community that Jesus came to establish called the church. For this week, what have you got going on at Huntersville?
So it will have our typical 8:30 and 10:30 services this week. Joyfully, we'll be receiving some new members. Joyfully, we are getting ready for our upcoming September 28th vote on a land sale. The vote will be at 10 a.m. on September 28th. So come this week, and if you have any questions, we're happy to try to answer those. But as we enter into a time of discernment as a church, we're moving toward that vote on September 28th at 10 a.m.
Okay. And at Denver this week, we have regular services 9 and 11 and Sunday school hour in between. And if you're looking to be a part of a Sunday school group, just talk with me. And we'll also have people. We've developed a new space in the church called the Hub, which is upstairs outside of the sanctuary, where you can get, if you've got a question about ministries or how to get involved, how to get engaged, that's the place to go. So thank you, Paul, and God bless you all, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.
Amen. Thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you.